Before you step into my story, take a deep breath. What you're about to hear isn't just a memory, it's a scar that still echoes in the dark. Every creak, every whisper, every cold breath against the walls of that basement. I remember it all. If you think you're ready to know what truly happened down there, then keep your eyes open. Because once you start reading, there's no turning back. The first thing I remember is the smell, damp wood, mold, and rust. The air down there was always thick, like it wanted to crawl inside my lungs and never leave. I was 8 when they first told me I would sleep in the basement. "It's quieter there," my mother said, her voice trembling just enough to make me realize she didn't believe her own words. The stairs creaked under my bare feet as I walked down carrying a thin blanket and a small pillow. There was no bed waiting for me, just a dirty mattress that looked older than I was. At first, I thought it was a punishment. But soon I learned it wasn't punishment, it was control. Every night, when the lights upstairs went off, I could hear the soft hum of the freezer beside me and the occasional footsteps above my head. Sometimes they stopped right over the trapdoor, and I'd freeze, too scared to breathe, praying they wouldn't come down. But they always did, slowly, quietly. Like the darkness itself had decided to take shape and visit me. The first time, I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I remember lying there, the sound of the door closing behind them echoing like a death sentence. Their shadows moved across the wall as the small light bulb flickered. My heart raced so hard I thought it might burst. "You'll stay down here until you learn to behave," my father whispered, though I didn't know what I'd done wrong. My hands trembled as I clutched the blanket. I could feel every heartbeat in my throat, every breath slicing through the silence. Sometimes he'd just stand there, watching me, and I could feel his eyes carving through my fear. Other nights, he wasn't alone. Voices, deep, drunk, whispering things that I didn't understand at the time, filled the room. And the next morning, no one spoke about it. Not him. Not my mother. Not my brother who pretended to sleep while I screamed silently into my pillow downstairs. Years passed like that. By 12, I had stopped asking why. I had stopped counting nights. The basement became both my prison and my hiding place. I learned to trace the cracks in the walls, to memorize the rhythm of the pipes when the heater came on, to use the faint light from the window to measure time. But something in me broke the night my mother came down with a tray of food and avoided looking at me. Her hands were shaking. "You have to understand," she whispered, setting the plate on the floor. "He's trying to protect you from yourself. Protect me?" I wanted to laugh, but I just stared at her, feeling the walls closing in tighter. That night, I realized the worst part wasn't what he did, it was her silence. Her refusal to see, her pretending that nothing was wrong. Then, one winter, when I was 14, something changed. I overheard them talking upstairs, whispers through the vents, words I wasn't supposed to hear. "She's getting too old," my father said. "People will start asking questions." My stomach twisted. That was the first time I realized what he was afraid of, not my pain, but exposure. The truth. I started planning. Every sound, every creak, every night became part of my escape plan. I began saving small things, a rusty nail, a piece of wire, anything I could use to pry the window open. I practiced holding my breath, counting seconds, moving silently. It took months. Until one night, during a storm that shook the house, I finally did it. I climbed through the narrow window, cutting my arm on the glass, and ran barefoot through the snow. My feet went numb within minutes, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran. I don't remember how long I ran or how far I got. But I remember the lights of a gas station glowing in the distance like a miracle. The man behind the counter looked at me, pale, bleeding, shaking, and didn't know what to say. "Please," I whispered, "don't send me back." He called the police. They came, they took me, and for a moment I thought it was over. But monsters don't vanish when the lights come on. They hide behind last names and fake smiles. They lie under oath. My father told them I was unstable, that I had a history of episodes. My mother nodded, eyes red, voice trembling. They almost believed him. Until the detective noticed the scars. Until they checked the basement. Until they found the locks on the outside of the door. Even now, years later, the sound of dripping water can make my heart race. I've rebuilt my life, piece by piece, like someone trying to reassemble a shattered mirror, carefully, painfully, knowing it will never look the same again. I still remember the smell of that place, the coldness of the concrete against my skin, the way the light flickered just before everything went dark. People tell me I'm brave for surviving. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I don't feel brave. I just feel small again. Trapped. Listening to the footsteps above, wondering if the door will open. The morning after my escape was supposed to be my freedom, but it didn't feel like that. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, and the fluorescent lights hummed above me like a warning. I sat on a cold metal chair, wrapped in a blanket that smelled nothing like home, watching as officers whispered to each other. "She's saying they locked her in a basement," one murmured. "The father's respected in town," another replied. Respected. That word hit me harder than any slap ever could. Because respect was his shield, his way of hiding in plain sight. When they finally let me speak, my voice trembled so much that even I barely believed my own words. I told them everything, the nights, the footsteps, the lies. They wrote it down like it was just another case. But for me, it was years of suffocation spilling out all at once. When they took pictures of my scars, I couldn't look. I just stared at the wall, counting the cracks, trying to remember how to breathe. They placed me in a foster home, a small house with peeling paint and a woman named Lorraine who smelled of cigarettes and vanilla. She tried to be kind, but kindness felt foreign. I couldn't sleep in a bed. I couldn't close my eyes without hearing the creak of those old basement stairs. Lorraine didn't ask many questions, but she always left a small lamp on at night. "Just in case you're afraid of the dark," she said once, and I almost laughed. If only darkness was the thing I was afraid of. School was worse. Everyone whispered, "That's the basement girl," they said when they thought I couldn't hear. I learned to walk fast, to keep my head down, to make myself invisible. But one person didn't treat me like a ghost, a boy named Michael. He sat next to me in English class and always asked if I'd eaten lunch. It was the first time in years someone looked at me without pity. One day, he invited me to his house. I almost said no, but something in his smile disarmed me. His family was loud, warm, messy, everything mine never was. His mother hugged him without hesitation, and I remember staring at them like I was watching a different world. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine belonging there. But reality has a cruel way of reminding you where you come from. A week later, a social worker came to tell me the trial was starting. "You'll have to testify," she said gently. My stomach turned. Facing him again was the one thing I swore I'd never do. But I had to, for the little girl still trapped inside that basement. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and cheap perfume. My father sat there, clean-shaven, calm, dressed like a man incapable of cruelty. My mother avoided my eyes. When they asked me to tell my story, my hands shook so hard that I had to grip the edge of the podium to stay upright. I told them about the nights, the screams, the silence. His lawyer tried to twist every word, turning my pain into confusion, my fear into imagination. "So you're saying your father, a respected mechanic, locked you in a basement for years without reason?" he asked, voice dripping with disbelief. I wanted to scream, but instead I looked straight at my father and said, "He didn't need a reason." The room went silent. That was the moment I saw something in his eyes, not guilt, not fear, but annoyance. As if my truth was merely inconvenient. When the verdict came, it wasn't the justice I dreamed of. He got 6 years. 6 years for a decade of stolen childhood. My mother walked free. She was under his control, they said. Maybe she was. But I couldn't forgive her, not yet. I was 17 when I left town. I took a bus with no destination, just wanting to be far enough that the past couldn't reach me. I worked odd jobs, cleaning motels, serving coffee, anything that kept me busy enough not to think. Some nights I'd wake up gasping, the scent of mold clinging to my dreams. I tried therapy. It helped, a little. My therapist said healing wasn't linear. But I didn't want healing, I wanted forgetting. Then one day, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a photo, the basement, empty, the walls freshly painted. And a note, "It's over now." I stared at it for hours, my hands trembling. Was it him? My mother? Or someone trying to erase what happened? That image haunted me more than the memories themselves. Because you can paint over walls, but you can't wash away what they've seen. I burned the letter that night. Watched the flames curl around it until nothing was left but ash. Years later, when I built my own home, I made sure it had no basement, no shadows, no place for ghosts to hide. But sometimes when it rains and the air smells like damp wood, I still feel it, that same chill running down my spine, whispering that freedom doesn't always mean peace. I kept that burned letter in my memory like a scar, something invisible but impossible to ignore. For months, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter who sent it. The past was gone, buried, sealed behind those painted walls. But the truth has a way of rotting beneath silence. One rainy afternoon, years later, I was working at a small diner on the outskirts of Portland. It was quiet, the kind of place where people came to disappear. I was wiping tables when a man walked in, tall, grey jacket, eyes that lingered too long. When I turned to greet him, my breath caught in my throat. He looked older, thinner, but I knew that face. It was my brother. I hadn't seen him in almost 15 years. "You look just like Mom," he said softly, like it was a compliment. My hands trembled around the coffee pot. He smiled, but there was something hollow in it. "You should come home," he whispered. Things are different now. The words twisted inside me like a blade. Home. That word had never meant anything but pain. That night, I couldn't sleep. His voice replayed in my head over and over. I told myself not to go, that there was nothing left for me there. But curiosity is cruel, and closure even crueler. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the old house, the one that had haunted my dreams for years. The windows were boarded up, the yard overgrown, but the shape of it, that silhouette against the grey sky, still made my stomach turn. I almost left, but then I saw her, my mother, standing on the porch like a ghost. She looked older, frailer, wrapped in a faded shawl. "You came," she whispered, as if she'd been waiting all this time. I wanted to hate her, to scream at her, but when I looked into her eyes, all I saw was exhaustion. She invited me inside. The house smelled the same, damp, dust, the faint trace of bleach trying to hide what could never be cleaned. We sat in silence until she finally said it. "He's gone. My father had died in prison 3 months earlier." And with him, the truth I'd spent half my life trying to understand. I thought that would bring me peace. It didn't. "Why now?" I asked her. "Why the letter? Why call me back?" She hesitated, then slid a small box across the table. "Because you need to know what really happened." Inside were old photographs, birthdays, holidays, things that looked normal if you didn't know the story behind the smiles. And then a recording, a small cassette labeled with a date I recognized, the night I escaped. My hands shook as I placed it in the player. Static crackled, followed by his voice. My father's voice, calm, controlled. "If she runs, it's because she's been told to. They'll believe her. They always do." My stomach twisted. Then another voice, my mother's. "She's a child. "You're destroying her, I'm saving her," he replied. "You know what happens if she remembers." The tape ended. I stared at the player, heart pounding. "If I remember," I whispered. What was I supposed to forget? My mother's face went pale. She started crying, trembling so hard her hands couldn't hold the teacup. "You don't understand," she said. "He wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting you." My mind spun. From what? She didn't answer, just nodded toward the basement door. Still there, still heavy, still whispering secrets through its cracks. I told myself I wouldn't go down there, but I did. The air was colder than I remembered, the walls newly painted but still breathing with ghosts. And then, behind a loose panel, I found it, a small metal box, sealed shut with tape. Inside were newspaper clippings, medical reports, and photos. My photo. Me as a little girl in a hospital gown, head bandaged. A date written underneath, 1999, 2 years before the basement. The articles spoke of an accident, a house fire. They said I was the only survivor, but the address wasn't ours. It was another family's home, another name. My name. "You weren't supposed to find that," my mother whispered from the stairs. My knees gave out. "Who am I?" I asked, voice breaking. She came closer, tears streaming down her face. "You were adopted," she said. "He didn't tell you because he thought you'd leave. And when you started remembering things from before, he thought keeping you isolated would keep you safe." My mind shattered in silence. Every scream, every night in that basement, it wasn't punishment. It was paranoia. A twisted form of protection built on fear and lies. I didn't know whether to feel hate or pity. Maybe both. I left that house before dawn, the cassette and the photo clutched in my hands. The world outside looked different, colder, quieter. I realized then that my father had stolen more than my childhood. He had stolen my truth. And my mother, by staying silent, had buried me into graves, the one of who I was, and the one of who I could have been. I changed my name again. I moved to another city. But the questions followed me like shadows. Who was that little girl before the fire? What did I lose in those missing years? And why, even now, did I sometimes wake up smelling smoke, hearing a voice I no longer recognized whispering my name in the dark? I couldn't rest after that night. The cassette played over and over in my head, every word twisting deeper into my chest like a knife. "If she remembers." That sentence echoed until it became more than a warning. It became a calling. I needed to know what I was supposed to remember. I left my job, packed what little I owned, and drove toward the town named in those clippings. It was a small place in Oregon, surrounded by forests so dense they swallowed the sunlight. As I approached, I felt the air grow colder, heavier, as if the land itself remembered something I didn't. The address from the newspaper led me to an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. The ashes of a foundation still peeked through the dirt, the remains of the fire. I stood there trembling as the wind carried the faint scent of burnt wood. Then I saw it, a single mailbox, rusted but still standing, with a faded name on it, Anderson. My real name. My heart stopped. Anderson. Not the one I grew up with. Not his name, mine. I spent the next weeks digging through public records, hospitals, libraries, anything that could tell me who the Andersons were. The town librarian, an old man with shaky hands, remembered the fire. "Tragic," he said. "Whole family gone. Except the little girl. They said she was taken in by relatives, but no one ever saw her again." My pulse raced. That little girl was me. But who were they to me? I found a report that mentioned a gas leak, accidental, they said. Yet, something about it didn't add up. The official photos were too clean, too selective. And then, in one of the police archives, I found a name scrawled in the margin, Detective R. Mathers, the man who investigated the case. I didn't know if he was still alive, but I needed to try. I tracked him down through an old registry. He lived 2 towns over, retired now, a widower. When I knocked on his door, he looked at me as if he'd seen a ghost. "You look just like her," he whispered. Inside his house, everything smelled of dust and paper. He poured tea with trembling hands and stared at me for a long time before speaking. "I knew this day would come," he said. He pulled out a file from an old box and slid it toward me. Inside were photos, charred walls, burnt furniture, a child's shoe melted into the floor. My stomach turned. "They told me it was an accident," I said. He nodded slowly. "That's what they wanted you to believe. But it wasn't gas. It was intentional." My skin went cold. "Intentional?" He leaned forward. "Someone set that fire. And the man who adopted you, he wasn't chosen by the state. He took you. Before we could find you, my mind went blank. He kidnapped me." The detective nodded, eyes filled with regret. "We searched for months, but he was smart. He moved you, changed your name, made you disappear." For a moment, the room tilted. My memories, the ones that had haunted me for years, suddenly began to make sense. The whispers, the lock stock, the fear. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid I'd remember what he'd done. "Who were my real parents?" I asked. Mather's side. "Your mother was Emily Anderson, a nurse. Your father, Daniel, was an engineer. They were good people." He hesitated. "And there was someone else, your mother's sister. She died in the fire too. Or so we thought." He handed me another photo, black and white, edges burned. I stared at it and froze. The woman in the picture wasn't my mother. It was the woman who raised me, the one I thought was my mother. "No," I whispered, voice breaking. "That's not possible," but it was. My adoptive mother wasn't just a victim. She was part of it. She had been there. That night. In that house. I drove for hours after that, barely seeing the road through the tears. Every piece of my life felt like a lie, every memory rewritten by the people who claimed to love me. When I finally stopped, it was near a lake, surrounded by silence. I stood there staring at my reflection on the surface, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the person looking back. I wasn't her daughter. I wasn't his prisoner. I was something in between, a shadow stitched together by lies. I thought about burning the file, ending it there, but something in me refused. I needed to confront her, the woman who called herself my mother. When I arrived at her new apartment, she didn't look surprised to see me. "I knew you'd find out," she said quietly. I threw the photo on the table. "You were there," I said. "You lied to me my whole life." She nodded, tears spilling down her face. "He made me," she said. "He said if I didn't help him, he'd finish what he started that night." My voice cracked. "What did he start?" She closed her eyes. "The fire wasn't supposed to kill them. It was meant for you." Silence. The room seemed to collapse around us. "He thought you weren't his. He thought your mother had betrayed him. So he burned the house down to erase you." My knees buckled. "And you helped him take me," she sobbed. "I thought I could protect you. I thought if I kept you close, you'd be safe. But I was wrong." The truth left me hollow. Every piece of love I thought I'd known turned into something dark and twisted. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "You don't get to say you loved me," I whispered. "Not after what you did." I walked out without looking back, her cries echoing behind me like ghosts clinging to the walls. That night, I drove until dawn, chasing a sunrise that didn't feel real. I realized then that some answers don't set you free, they just open new wounds in places you didn't know could bleed. The night after I confronted her, I sat alone in a motel room off Highway 26, staring at the file I'd taken from Detective Mather's. The hum of the neon sign outside bled through the window, flickering over the papers spread across the bed like the ghosts of the people I used to be. I couldn't stop replaying her words. "It was meant for you." My heart felt like it was being ripped apart in slow motion. If the fire was supposed to kill me, then every second of my life since had been borrowed time. I flipped through the documents again, desperate for something I'd missed. And then, buried at the bottom, I found it, a photograph burned at the edges, showing a man standing beside a red truck. Written on the back, in faded ink, were 3 words: "He never left, my blood ran cold." The man in the photo wasn't my adoptive father. He was someone else. Someone I'd never seen before. But the truck, I knew that truck. It used to sit behind the old barn on the property, covered by a tarp, engine rusted but intact. I had walked past it hundreds of times, never realizing what it meant. If you've made it this far, you already feel it, don't you? That crawling sense that something isn't right, that the shadows are closer now. But trust me, the worst part isn't what I saw. It's what I heard whispering my name when I was all alone. So don't stop now. The truth hides just beneath the next line, and it's waiting for you. I drove back there the next morning. The house was still empty, the yard choked with weeds. The tarp flapped in the wind like a ghost trying to speak. When I pulled it off, my breath caught. The red truck was still there, exactly as in the photo. The plates were gone, the tires half sunk into the mud, but on the dashboard lay a small metal box. Inside were cassette tapes, dozens of them, labeled with dates, years spanning my entire childhood. My hands trembled as I slid one into a player I found in the glove compartment. The tape crackled, and then his voice filled the air, my adoptive father's voice, calm, cold, familiar. Day 16. She doesn't remember yet. She asks about the fire sometimes. I tell her it was a dream, my stomach twisted. I switch to another tape. Year 3. She's starting to draw again, flames. Always flames. Each recording was a piece of evidence, proof that he'd been documenting me, not raising me. I wasn't a daughter to him. I was an experiment. A secret to control. When I played the final tape, my entire world shifted. The recording began with a faint whimper, my voice, small, trembling. "Daddy, what did I do?" And then his reply, smooth and chilling, "You survived what you weren't supposed to." Silence. Then the sound of fire crackling, faint but unmistakable. My hands shook so hard the player fell to the ground. I could barely breathe. The man who had burned my world to ashes had kept trophies of my pain. Proof that he'd planned every lie, every manipulation, every night in that basement. He hadn't been afraid I'd remember something untrue. He'd been afraid I'd remember him, what he'd done. I felt something break inside me that I couldn't fix anymore. Rage, grief, disbelief, all of it collided into one unbearable truth. He hadn't just stolen me. He'd tried to erase me. I called Detective Mathers. My voice was shaking so much I could barely get the words out. "I found something," I said. When he arrived and saw the tapes, he went pale. "This is enough," he whispered. Enough to reopen everything. The next weeks blurred together in a storm of interviews, statements, and evidence. The recordings revealed more than anyone expected. Not just the kidnapping, but names. People who had helped him falsify documents, people who knew and looked the other way. It wasn't one man's madness, it was a web of silence. My mother's silence. The town's silence. Even the system's silence. For years, they had all played a part in keeping me hidden, in letting the truth rot beneath their respectability. When the case finally made headlines, I didn't watch the news. I didn't want to hear my story twisted into something sensational. I stayed by the lake where I used to think the world ended. It was quiet there, the kind of quiet that used to scare me, but now felt almost holy. I sat on the shore, watching the reflection of the sky ripple across the water. For the first time, I spoke to the girl I used to be, the one in the basement, the one who thought the world would never believe her. "We made it," I whispered. The wind moved through the trees like an answer. I didn't forgive them. I didn't forget. But I finally understood that survival wasn't about escaping the darkness. It was about learning to carry light through it. Months later, the detective called me again. They had found something else. A warehouse registered under a false name, containing everything my father had taken: files, recordings, photographs, and one final letter, addressed to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to keep you close. The world took everything from me, and I couldn't lose you too. If you're reading this, it means I failed. But remember, you were always mine. I folded the paper slowly, tears blurring the words. For a moment, I almost felt the old confusion, the twisted, desperate love of a man who had destroyed everything he claimed to protect. But then I realized something. I was never his. I never belonged to the fire. I belonged to the ashes that refused to die. That night, I burned the letter by the lake. The flames flickered like memories trying to find their way home. When the last ember faded, I finally felt it. Not peace, not closure, but clarity. My story didn't end in that basement, or in the fire, or even in the lies they told to bury the truth. It ended here, with me, alive. And for the first time, I wasn't running anymore. I was remembering everything they tried so hard to make me forget. I thought that burning the letter would be the end. But endings are never clean. The ashes from that night seemed to follow me wherever I went, settling quietly in the corners of my new life. A year had passed since the investigation closed, and I tried to build something resembling normalcy. I changed my last name again, started working at a community center for trauma survivors. It was strange, teaching others how to face their pain while still trying to understand my own. Every morning I'd stand in front of that cracked mirror, repeating words my therapist had taught me: "You are safe now. You are free." But some mornings, the reflection didn't believe me. Freedom, I realized, didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to live with the ghosts without letting them own your voice. So I started writing, first in journals, then on anonymous blogs. I poured everything out: the fire, the lies, the tapes, the years of silence. I thought no one would read them, but people did. Thousands did. Survivors, strangers, voices that echoed mine. For the first time, my pain became more than a memory. It became a bridge. The blog grew faster than I could have imagined. Messages flooded in, people sharing their stories, their secrets, their fears. They told me that my words made them feel seen, that they finally believed healing was possible. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt exposed. But there was power in that vulnerability. Eventually, a journalist reached out, said they wanted to write about my case, about the system that failed me and the countless others like me. I hesitated for weeks. I didn't want to relive it all again, to open wounds that had barely begun to scar. But then I remembered the girl in the basement, the one no one believed. I owed her this. So I agreed. The story ran under the headline, "The Girl Who Lived in the Dark." It spread faster than I expected. I received letters from people across the country. Some offered comfort, others questions. And then, one message changed everything. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, postmarked from a town I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The picture showed the lake, my lake, taken from across the shore. In the corner of the photo, standing among the trees, was a shadow, a man. And on the paper, written in shaky handwriting, were 3 words: "He never died." My hands went numb. I sat there staring at it, trying to convince myself it was a cruel prank. My father was dead. I'd seen the records, the confirmation from the prison. It wasn't possible. But the handwriting, it looked familiar. Almost too familiar. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I called Detective Mathers immediately, my voice barely holding steady. He told me to stay calm, to send the photo to him. But I could hear something in his tone, hesitation, fear. Like he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound outside my window felt sharper, closer. Around midnight, I thought I saw movement near the tree line behind my house, just a flicker, like someone stepping into the dark. I told myself it was paranoia, trauma playing tricks again. But when I went outside in the morning, there were footprints in the mud. Heavy, deliberate, not mine. I started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. The comfort I'd built began to crumble. I stopped writing, stopped answering messages, stopped leaving the house at night. My therapist said it could be my mind trying to process everything, that the letter had triggered old fears. But deep down, I wasn't sure. Some fears don't fade, they evolve. A week later, I received an email. No sender name, no subject line, just a single video attachment. My stomach twisted as I pressed play. The screen flickered with static before showing a dark room. Then a figure stepped into frame, a man, older, face hidden in shadow. His voice was deep, cracked, but unmistakable. "You shouldn't have looked back," he said. "You were supposed to forget," my breath caught. "I made you strong, and now you're wasting it telling stories." He leaned closer to the camera. "You think I died. Fire doesn't kill what it creates." The video cut to black. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. The timestamp showed it was uploaded from a public library an hour from where I lived. I called Mathers again, sent him the file. He promised to handle it, but I could hear the disbelief in his voice, disbelief mixed with something darker. Because if that voice was real, it meant the impossible. He had survived. The days after that blurred together in a fog of fear and disbelief. The police traced the upload but found nothing. The security cameras at the library had been tampered with. Every logical part of me said it had to be a fake, a manipulation. But logic didn't quiet the nights. I started hearing things again, whispers in the walls, faint footsteps that stopped when I moved. I kept the lights on, slept with the phone in my hand. Then, one morning, I found another envelope taped to my door. No message this time, just a cassette. The same kind he used to record me with. I didn't play it. I couldn't. I gave it to Mathers. He promised to analyze it, but I saw the way his face changed when he touched it, like he already knew what was on it. For the next few weeks, I tried to convince myself I was safe, that maybe someone was just trying to scare me. But the fear felt too personal, too intimate. Whoever it was knew things no stranger could know. One night, I sat by the lake again, the water calm and black beneath the moonlight. I whispered to the reflection, "You can't haunt me anymore." But somewhere in the stillness, a voice seemed to answer, low, distorted. Almost like a breath carried by the wind. "You never left." I froze. My heart stopped. The sound faded, and I was alone again. But in that moment, I knew some fires never really die. They just learn to hide in the dark, waiting to be remembered. When Detective Mathers called the next morning, I knew by the tremor in his voice that something was wrong. He asked me to come to the station immediately, said they'd found something during the analysis of the cassette. The drive there felt endless. Every red light burned longer than usual. Every passing car looked like it was following me. When I arrived, Mathers was waiting outside, smoking, something he'd quit years ago. He didn't speak at first, just handed me a file and gestured for me to sit. Inside were photographs, grainy, black and white, taken from old surveillance footage. One of them showed a man entering a hospital under a false identity in 2003, the same year my father was declared dead. The timestamp was 2 months after his supposed cremation. My stomach flipped. "We ran a partial facial reconstruction," Mathers said quietly. "It's not conclusive, but it's close." To close, I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The room spun. "Are you telling me he's alive?" I whispered. Mathers didn't answer. He just looked away and said, "We think someone helped him disappear." That night, I tore through every box of memories I'd tried to bury. Letters, photographs, fragments of a childhood I had rewritten in my mind to survive it. There was one picture I hadn't noticed before, me at 10 years old, standing next to my mother. Behind us, blurred but visible, was a man in a dark coat. At first glance, it looked like my father. But the date on the back was from 2 years after his alleged death. My mother's handwriting confirmed it. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat. The pieces didn't fit, unless she had known, unless she'd lied. I found myself dialing her number before I could stop. When she answered, her voice trembled like it always did when she was hiding something. "Mom," I said, "why did you tell me he was dead?" Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Because he was supposed to be," she finally whispered. "They promised me he would be." I froze. "Who promised you?" But the line went dead. I drove to her house that night, through rain that blurred the world into streaks of grey and gold. Her house looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, like it might collapse under the weight of its own secrets. She opened the door before I knocked, as if she'd been waiting. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. "They're watching again." My heart pounded. "Who?" I demanded. She looked past me, toward the street, then whispered, "The same people who kept him alive." The words hit like a blade. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old perfume. On the kitchen table were piles of letters, all from a single sender with no name, no return address. My mother handed me one. Inside was a note in that same familiar handwriting. "She talks, she dies." My mother's lips trembled. "They said if I told you, they'd come for you too. I thought hiding the truth would save you." Her voice cracked. I thought the lie was protection. Before I could respond, the lights flickered. A car had pulled up outside, black, windows tinted. My mother's face went pale. "It's them," she whispered. She grabbed my wrist, dragged me toward the back door. We ran through the garden, the mud soaking our shoes, until we reached the edge of the woods. I could hear doors slamming behind us, footsteps crunching on gravel. "Keep running," she said, pushing me forward. "Don't look back." But I did. And I saw him, standing by the gate, half-shadowed, soaked by rain, older, thinner, but unmistakably him. My father. His eyes met mine through the dark. He didn't move, didn't speak, just smiled. That same quiet, cruel smile I had prayed never to see again. I froze. My mother yanked my arm. "Go," she screamed. Then there was a sound, a gunshot, and she fell. I remember the echo of it, the way it silenced the rain for a heartbeat. I ran until my legs gave out. I don't remember how long. Hours, maybe. When I finally stopped, I was by the lake again, the same one I used to stare at as a child, counting ripples to calm my fear. But this time, it wasn't calm. The reflection trembled with every breath of wind, like it was alive, like it knew. I called Mathers, my voice breaking, told him what happened. Within minutes, patrols were dispatched. They found my mother's body by the garden fence, her hand still clutching one of the letters. But there was no sign of him. No footprints. No car. Nothing. Like he'd been swallowed by the storm itself. The following weeks blurred together into interrogation rooms, sleepless nights, and questions with no answers. The police said the camera footage from the neighborhood had been wiped. The letters disappeared from the evidence locker 2 days later. Mathers told me privately that he believed me, but there were forces above him, people who wanted the case buried again. He was part of something bigger, he said one night, his face drawn and tired. Whatever he did to you, it wasn't just about control. He was protecting something, or someone, that terrified me more than anything, because it meant the story wasn't over. It meant I was still inside it. I started keeping a journal again, not to heal this time, but to document everything. Every call, every shadow, every sound that didn't belong. Because if he was alive, he wanted me afraid. But I wasn't that girl anymore. Fear had made me strong once, now it made me sharp. I began tracing his past, the jobs he held under aliases, the people who vanished after working with him. Patterns emerged. The same town names, the same organizations. And one in particular kept repeating, the Foundation for Behavioral Correction. A name buried deep in government funding reports, tied to child welfare programs that never existed. It was the same name printed on the back of that tape box from the basement. He hadn't just been my father. He'd been part of something built on silence. And if that's true, then I was never the only one. It took me months to track down the name, but every lead led to a dead end until one night, while scrolling through government archives, I found a classified document mislabeled under public housing contracts. The Foundation for Behavioral Correction was listed not as a charity, but as a research initiative, active from 1985 to 2004, the exact years of my childhood. Its stated purpose, exploration of conditioning and adaptive response in minors, my blood ran cold. It wasn't just a name. It was a project, and I was one of their subjects. I stared at the names of the directors, hoping to see a stranger's name, but there it was, Dr. Henry S. Calloway, my father, listed not as a volunteer, not as a patient, but as lead investigator. The air left my lungs. He hadn't hurt me out of madness or cruelty alone, he'd been experimenting, testing obedience, isolation, trauma responses. The basement wasn't just a prison, it was a lab. And I was the experiment. I printed the file and took it straight to Mathers the next morning. His reaction was immediate, his face drained of color. "You shouldn't have this," he said, locking the door behind him. This project was sealed under federal order. People have vanished for less. I slammed the papers on his desk. "Then tell me why my father's name is here. Tell me why no one ever stopped him." Mathers rubbed his temples, defeated. Because they were never supposed to. This wasn't one man's sickness, it was sanctioned. They funded a program to test behavioral compliance in children of unstable families. Your father wasn't the only one doing it. He was one of dozens. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "And the others?" I asked. "Where are they now?" He hesitated. "Most are dead. The ones who survived were told to forget." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flicker of the red light from that old recorder, the hum of the generator in the basement, the way he used to whisper after each session, "Obedience is safety." It had never been about safety. It had been about control. Control so complete it rewired my sense of self. I decided then that I wouldn't run anymore. I wanted to expose them, all of them. So I started digging deeper, tracing other victims. The trail led me to a woman named Claire Montrose, who ran a small support group for survivors of government abuse. When I mentioned the foundation, she froze. "You shouldn't say that name," she whispered. "They're still out there." She handed me an envelope before leaving the cafe. Inside were photos, children in white rooms, wearing the same identification tags I remembered from my sessions. One photo stopped my breath, a girl, maybe 12, strapped to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. Written on the back, subject for 7B. My ID number had been for 7A. I contacted Claire again, but her phone was disconnected. 2 days later, news broke that she'd been found dead. A supposed car accident. My gut told me otherwise. I went to her house, pretending to be a family friend. Inside, everything was untouched, except one thing, a note taped under her desk. It read, "They erase what they can't control. Don't let them erase you." That night, I packed my things and left town. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Mathers. I drove until the highway blurred into nothing, until my mind felt half between dream and reality. I found a small motel near the border and checked in under a fake name. For days, I stayed there, piecing together the evidence, writing it all down like a confession that would outlive me. But even there, in that silence, I wasn't alone. I started noticing small things, the same car parked across the street every night, the subtle clicks on my phone line, the way the TV would turn itself on at 3 a.m. Once, while showering, I heard a knock on the bathroom door. When I opened it, no one was there, but the mirror was fogged with a single word, "Remember." I wanted to believe it was my imagination, but my imagination didn't leave footprints outside my window. I installed cameras, but they always cut out at the same time, to 47 a.m., the exact number on my old ID tag. It wasn't coincidence. It was a message. They wanted me to know they were close. I sent the files anonymously to every major journalist I could find, attaching one sentence, "If I disappear, you'll know why." For days, I waited, terrified. Then one outlet published a small piece, not the full story, but enough to spark whispers online. Survivors began coming forward, some with their own documents, their own scars. The story spread fast. And that's when the threats began, emails, unmarked packages. And then, one night, a single text message you were supposed to forget. Now you'll be the example. That same night, the motel fire alarms went off. Smoke filled the halls. I barely made it out before the flames consumed everything I owned, my notes, my laptop, the files. The fire department said it was faulty wiring. I knew better. I stood across the street, watching the building collapse into embers, the same way the basement once burned. It was poetic, almost deliberate, erasing the evidence with fire, just like before. But they'd made one mistake. I still had the memory, and I wasn't going to let them bury it again. The night after the motel fire, I slept in my car, engine off, windows fogged, the silence pressing against me like a second skin. I hadn't eaten in days, but hunger didn't matter anymore, not when I was certain they were watching. Every pair of headlights behind me felt deliberate, every sound outside the car controlled to be random. At dawn, I drove to an old public library to towns over, the kind with cracked marble floors and dust-covered archives no one ever touched. I used one of their computers to search for the Foundation for Behavioral Correction again. The database was gone, wiped clean, every record deleted. But something unexpected appeared instead, a single PDF hidden in an abandoned research repository under the title Project Resilience, Phase 4, Post-Subject Containment. My pulse quickened. I clicked it open. The document was short, 5 pages, but it felt like the ground split beneath me as I read. My name appeared halfway through. Subject for 7A. Status, terminated, psychological reconstruction incomplete, terminated, not released, not recovered, terminated. As if I had died 20 years ago. According to that file, I wasn't supposed to exist. I printed the document, my hands trembling so hard the paper nearly tore. At the bottom of the page was a signature. Not my father's. Detective Raymond Mathers. My chest seized. I read it again, my vision blurring. Mathers, the man who claimed to help me, who swore to protect me, had been part of it all along. It wasn't shock I felt. It was betrayal so deep it cracked something inside me that I didn't know could still break. The memories began rearranging themselves every time he'd said, "You're safe now," every file he'd taken for protection, every delay in the investigation. He wasn't hiding the truth from me. He was hiding it from me, and I'd handed him everything. The tapes, the letters, the evidence. All of it. I left the library and drove straight to his house. The sun was setting, turning the sky into a smear of red and gold that looked almost biblical. His car was in the driveway, but the windows were dark. I didn't knock. The door was unlocked. Inside, everything was too clean, too empty, like no one had lived there for weeks. I found his office at the back, papers shredded, drawers emptied. But there in the corner, half hidden behind a filing cabinet, was a steel box marked for 7A, my breath caught. Inside were photos of me, not recent ones, but taken over the years, from places I'd lived, jobs I'd held. I wasn't paranoid. I was being watched. There was also a USB drive labeled reconstruction footage. I plugged it into his computer. The screen flickered, then played a video, grainy, timestamp 2 years after my father's supposed death. The video showed a hospital room. My father was sitting by a bed, his face gaunt but alive. On the bed lay a young girl, unconscious, me. Electrodes on my temples, for lines in my arms. A woman's voice behind the camera said, "Subject for 7A stable. Behavioral reprogramming in progress." My father turned to the camera, smiling faintly. "She's adapting faster than predicted," he said. "If she survives this phase, she'll never remember," the woman asked, "and if she does," he looked straight into the lens, "then we'll remind her who she belongs to." The screen froze. I couldn't breathe. They hadn't just hurt me, they'd erased me, rewired me, built a version of me that would never ask questions. And Mathers had helped cover it all. My phone buzzed suddenly, yanking me out of the trance. A message from an unknown number, "Get out of the house." Before I could react, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, measured. I turned off the computer and slipped out the back door, cutting through the yard into the alley. A car engine started behind me. I ran until my lungs burned, ducking between fences, through backyards, until I reached an old industrial park near the edge of town. I hid inside an abandoned warehouse, the kind where sound dies before it reaches the walls. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I replayed the footage in my mind over and over, my father's face, the wires, the calmness in his voice. I wasn't supposed to survive, and yet somehow I did. That meant one thing: someone had gone against their orders. Hours passed before I noticed it, a file folder left on a metal table near the center of the warehouse. It wasn't dusty like everything else. Someone had been there recently. Inside were documents, field reports, memos, photos of other children labeled with the same sequence pattern as mine, for 6B, for 8A, for 9C. Some were marked deceased, others unaccounted for. And on the last page, a single handwritten note: "If you're reading this, it means he failed. They can't erase what's already remembered. Finish what he started, end the program." The handwriting was shaky but familiar. My mother's. My vision blurred again, this time not from fear, but from something heavier, grief mixed with purpose. She had known everything. Her silence hadn't been cowardice. It had been sacrifice. She had stayed quiet long enough for me to reach this point. For the first time, I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I knew what had to be done. The foundation still existed, operating under new names, new faces. But I had proof now: files, footage, testimonies from others who had begun reaching out through encrypted forums. The world thought we were ghosts. But ghosts can speak. And I was done whispering. I returned to the lake, the same place where it had all started, and where it had all burned. The trees still leaned the same way, their silhouettes like bent crosses against the night sky. I stood there, the cold biting into my fingers, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and memory. I had one final copy of the files, encrypted and scheduled for release if anything happened to me. I wasn't afraid anymore, not of him, not of them, not even of dying. Fear had built the walls of that basement. Tonight, I was here to tear them down. My plan was simple: confront him, record everything, and finish it. I had traced a hidden access road through government blueprints, a forgotten tunnel leading beneath the burned ruins of the old house. That was where the foundation had started, and I knew he'd return to it. Men like him always circle back to the place where they believed they were gods. The tunnel stank of mold and iron. My flashlight cut through the dark in thin beams, revealing rusted pipes and broken machinery. The deeper I went, the colder it became, not the kind of cold you feel on your skin, but the kind that seeps into your bones and whispers that you shouldn't be here. After what felt like hours, I reached a door marked control room. I pushed it open, and there he was. My father alive, his hair white, his face older, but his eyes, those sharp, predatory eyes, hadn't changed. He was sitting calmly at a desk surrounded by flickering monitors showing surveillance footage of places I recognized: the lake, the warehouse, Mother's house. He had been watching everything. I knew you'd come back, he said softly. You always do, my breath caught, but I didn't move. You're supposed to be dead, I said. He smiled. Death is a privilege for those who finish their work. Mine isn't done yet. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate, rehearsed. You've done well, he said. Better than I expected. You survived everything they gave you, every test, every trauma. You're proof that the system works. My voice trembled with anger. You tortured me, I shouted. You broke me into pieces. He shook his head, almost tenderly. No, I rebuilt you. You think you escaped me, but everything you've become, the strength, the will, the obsession, it's all because of me. You're my masterpiece. I stepped closer, the flashlight trembling in my hand. If I'm your masterpiece, then tonight I destroy your art. His smirk faltered. You wouldn't. You still need answers. I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone, hitting record. Then start talking, I said. Tell me everything. He began pacing, his shadow stretching long and warped against the wall. You were chosen because you were strong, he said. Because you had the kind of mind that bends but doesn't break. The foundation needed proof that trauma could be engineered, that obedience could be built from pain. You were the control variable. Every test subject was measured against you. My stomach turned. And Mathers, I asked. What was he? My father's smile returned, colder now. He was my successor. Until he failed. He thought he could protect you. He thought love would undo the programming. His tone shifted, dripping with disgust. Love is a weakness, my dear. It always has been. Before I could answer, I heard the click, the metallic sound of a safety being released. Mathers stepped from the shadows behind him, a gun in his hand, his face hollow with exhaustion. It ends tonight, Henry, he said. My heart twisted. You knew, I whispered. He nodded, eyes wet. I tried to stop him, but every time I did, they reminded me what would happen if I failed. They erased the others. I couldn't let them erase you, my father laughed, a deep, echoing sound that filled the room. You think you can kill an idea. You think ending me will change what's already been done. She is the program now. Every instinct, every choice, every rebellion, all designed by me. Mathers fired. The gunshot split the air like thunder. My father staggered, blood blooming across his chest. He looked at me, almost proud. You see, he whispered. Even your freedom was scripted. Then he fell. The silence that followed was unbearable. Mathers dropped the gun and sank to the floor, trembling. It's over, he said. But I knew it wasn't. Not really. I walked to the desk and grabbed the hard drive connected to the monitors. No, I said quietly. Now it begins. I uploaded everything, the files, the footage, the confessions, to every server I could access. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Government denials flooded the media, but it was too late. The truth had escaped. The Foundation's name was no longer a whisper. It was a reckoning. A week later, I returned to the lake again. The fireflies danced above the water, and for the first time, I felt something close to peace. My father was gone, but his shadow would live in the world's memory, not as a god, but as a monster finally seen. I whispered to the reflection, "You don't owe me any more," and this time, the water stayed still. Freedom didn't feel like a scream or a victory. It felt like silence, the kind that doesn't hurt anymore. And for the first time in my life, I believed it.